Welcome in. It is day 145, and you're speaking to the Meeples Champion. And today we're going to be jumping into a much smaller game. This is a game I was actually gifted by my in-laws on the first Christmas after I met my wife. And it was not a huge game for me. It was a little bit below my level, but it was one I was really excited to hold on to because I know one day, it still hasn't quite reached that point yet, that when I had a kid, that when he or she was old enough, that it was going to be a great intro game. That game is Dragonwood. Now, the idea of Dragonwood is that you're slowly collecting all of these different cards in your hand, and you're trying to go and defeat monsters. You're going to end up having monsters, equipment, and potential events that are all mixed together in a deck, and they're coming out. And you're going to have all of these different cards that are in your hands that you can use to either use a strike, to use a stomp, or to attempt to hit them with one of your big events. Well, in order to do this, you have to, when you face a card, play cards from your hand. So it'll show all three of the ways you can hit them. And each one of them will have a number. Well, you then have to play cards to represent what you're choosing. So for instance, if you want to do a strike, you have to do a straight. So every card that you can play from your hand that can go 2, 3, 4, 5 represents a die. So you'll say, all right, well, to beat this monster requires a 9. I had a straight of 4 cards, so I get 4 dice. I now roll my dice, and if my dice add up to 9 or more, I defeat the monster, and now it goes into my victory points pile. And every monster, obviously, they'll get slowly stronger and stronger to represent why they're worth so many victory points, even though it will be a little shift as to whether you can beat them easier or not, depending on which thing you're going for. For instance, if you go for the stomp instead of doing a straight, you're now trying to get, multiple of the same number. So you might have 3 8s. Or you might be going for your final hit, which is going to be trying to get a flush, all of the same suit. So you have that option. You also have the option to do the same thing, but try to get equipment. Now, the equipment setup is when you get the equipment, you do what you're trying to do to get it, same concept of how you get it. And if you do get it, it's permanently increasing something. So it might say your strike is going to increase by a power of 2. Now, that doesn't mean you roll 2 dice. It just means if it requires a 7 to defeat it and you have a 2, now it only requires a strike of a 5. And whatever your dice are rolling only has to add up to a 5. Now, if you miss any of these, whether it's equipment or monsters, you're immediately going to have to discard one of the cards from your hand. And if you pull one of the events, the event usually affects everybody. So it might say everybody has to discard a card. It might end up destroying a piece of equipment in front of people. So you're going to play through the game, and you're going to do this until either the deck of cards runs out, or both dragons have come out and have been defeated. When one of these things happen, the game ends, you pull out your cards that you've defeated, you count up your victory points, and you see who the winner is. It's very basic. This isn't a game that's meant to be complicated, but it's a really nice little intro game for somebody who's on the younger side, who's excited to try out something that's not just checkers or rummy or Rummy Cube or Scrabble. Something that you can kind of get into that's a little different, has a little bit of a theme, has a little bit of a shift on those old school games. Well, why don't we jump into our 7 categories and see where this really lands for us. When it comes to that art, this game's okay. There's nothing particularly special to me about it, but it's a nice front cover. I remember when I got the game and I didn't know what it was, I was excited. I was like, oh, okay, it's a cool name. It's got a dragon on the front. It's an okay art. I opened it up. I was like, all right, there's some cool art on the cards. It didn't hit for me as far as a difficulty level because I was already pretty high advanced in the experience level, but it was definitely one that visually didn't turn me away. So I think the art's acceptable. I'm going to give it a thumbs up. The components. So the components are only 2 things. You have the dice, which there's only a few dice in this game, and it's dice. I mean, you have to be really bad to mess a die up. And then you have the cards, which are fine. They're a good quality. I don't feel these cards are going to easily tear. They're not going to wear easily on you. So I think the components are acceptable. It's going to be a thumbs up. your price. Now, this is a game that you can find at Targets, at Barnes and Nobles, and probably find it at 2 to 3 board game stores out of 5. It's available online, and it's not expensive. It's right in that $30 range. I think that the price is completely acceptable, and it's out there to get, so I'm going to give that a thumbs up. Your difficulty. Now, this is where it hits hard, because this is a game that's really meant for beginners and kids. It's got a little bit of a theme, and I think as a parent, I'd be excited when my daughter wants to start playing to sit down and play this game with her, because I'll be excited to see her trying something of this different type from what she'll have already been playing. But I myself am not excited for this particular game. I think when you look at it, it's great for kids, it's great for beginners. But those beginners are only going to be okay with this for a little bit. It's a great start game, but not one that, if you're in your 20s or 30s, this isn't a game that's going to keep your interest long. I think if you're a younger kid, you could play this for a few years and probably enjoy it. But as a beginner who's on the older side, you're probably going to get an idea for it and go, oh, I really do like fantasy theme. I like the concept of doing stuff with these cards, and then move beyond it very quickly. Experienced and expert players, I feel, only care if they're going to be parents and they want to play with their kid. Beyond that, they're not going to want to play this game. So for me, I have to give this a thumbs down, because that difficulty is just a little bit too heavy for me. Your replayability. I think that this game is not one that you're going to, again, as an expert, as an experienced player, and even as a beginner, that you're going to want to play on a weekly or monthly basis. And when you do pull it out, well, it's not very long. I just don't feel this is one that you're going to be super excited to play various times in a row. I think that it's going to be played and be done with pretty quickly. So in my opinion, this just doesn't have much replayability. Those kids, yes. And as a parent with your kids, sure. That's not enough replayability for me, so it's gotta be a thumbs down. Your keys to victory. Part of the reason that a game is better for that kids and beginners section is because it's not too complicated, and it's not complicated because there's not that many keys to victory. It's very straightforward. This game is all about defeating the monsters to get their victory points, and that's it. And in order to do that, you're trying to collect cards and choose if you're going after one of the 3 ways to attack it. If you want to get equipment, you can get equipment, but the equipment only helps you with the number. It doesn't give you any type of victory points. So I don't feel there's really much option here when it comes to those keys to victory. You've got a couple routes, but to me, it doesn't feel like you have a lot to make you feel like you're really getting into some gameplay. So it's got to be a thumbs down there. Unique. Is it unique? So I've kind of looked across this and really tried to think, yeah, I don't have many games like this in my collection, but does it reflect anything? Well, the concept of how you do those attacks is based on straights, 3, 4, 5 of kinds, and flushes. So it's poker. And defeating the monsters is all about die rolling and trying to outdo their number, which you could reflect to so many different type of war games. And the randomness of what's coming out, I mean, that can be reflected to many different games. This is not a game that if I want any little piece of it, I can't go find another game in my collection that does that little piece and then a bunch extra. I don't think this is unique. I think this is great for beginners, and it's got a cool little theme to it. But while I may not find another game that I go, oh, here's a comparison to it, it itself just has nothing special about it. There's nothing that stands out from this game to me as, wow, they do this thing so different than other people. They do a bunch of things that other people do, and that's it. And that's what their claim to fame is we do a bunch of things that other people do, just in an easier way for kids. I don't think it's unique. It's got to be a thumbs down. Overall, what do I think? This isn't a game I would buy. This isn't a game that I would go out and make an effort to play. But if you've got a young kid who's interested in games or is interested in pursuing something beyond their current game level, if you're a parent who wants to play a game with your kid and you want them to get into some of your bigger fantasy games or something that isn't those old school games, I think it's a great game to bring into your collection or to bring to game night and to try out. And then it could be a nice little bridge. It's an okay bridge game in that way. But I think that has to be up to you, your family, your kids, and really judging the scenario well for yourself. Because I think this is the kind of thing that as we progress forward through these years, we've already seen over the last 2 decades how different, you know, 2000 to 2010 and 2010 to 2020 were for the availability of games and where people are now starting with games. It's so much easier for you to kick in and be like, yeah, today's, teenagers or younger kids who start a game are playing such a more advanced game than even 10 years ago, never mind 20 years ago. So who knows in another 10 years if a game like this will be considered so low that nobody's going to want to touch it. So it's going to be up to you. It's just my opinion, but you have to really judge this for you and your family and your game group and see where it lands. Well, it has been day 145, and we've been speaking about the game Dragonwood. And you've been speaking to the Meeples champion. Like, share, subscribe, and check down below in the description. If you are interested in this game, I'll add it in the Amazon link for you so you can pick it up for your collection. Until next time, I'll talk to you tomorrow.